Are you looking to learn more about investing in the central Indiana real estate market? You've come to the right place. Welcome to the Indy Real Estate Investing Podcast with T&H Realty, where we discuss all things related to investing in the central Indiana real estate market. Thank you for listening and enjoy the show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Indy Real Estate Investing Podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Tallman with T&H Realty. We are a residential property management company that services the central Indiana market. With me today, once again, are both Devon Hicks from our brokerage group and Jake Knight, our business development manager. Welcome back, you two.
Thank you.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
Yeah, so we just recently announced, it was just last Friday actually, that T&H is now covering Muncie, Indiana. So, we've developed some content about that. We obviously sent a group email to all of our clients about it. We've been working on a couple pieces of content for our website in the forms of blogs and other informational pages. But I thought it made sense, since we have a podcast, to bring you two on to kind of take a deep dive into the Muncie market, so our listeners can get a good idea of what to expect if they're interested in investing there. So Devon, start with you. You were, instrumental in getting us started up there. And Jake, you next. You're going to be instrumental along with Devon in kind of getting our properties under management up there. So I thought you two, again, were a couple of people within our organization that were best suited to talk about Muncie. So Jake, you have a unique situation with Muncie, a unique relationship with Muncie, I should say. So why don't you go ahead and give everyone a quick rundown of Muncie in terms of, population, where it's located, and some basic facts about Muncie.
Yeah, sure. Well, Muncie is a mid-sized city located between Indianapolis and Fort Wayne, which is the second biggest city in Indianapolis. It's got a population of about 65,000, which makes it a similar size to Noblesville and Greenwood, which are a little bit closer right outside of Indy here. I went to Ball State, which is the largest employer in Muncie. So, I lived there for 4 years, got my degree. And as part of the education program, I've done a lot of volunteering in Muncie, actually, at the Children's Museum. And this is a number of years ago, but kind of got to know not only the student life, but, obviously just kind of regular people up there. Muncie's kind of an interesting place. If you watch some films, it's mentioned in, just various different films like Encounters of the Third Kind. I think that was set in Muncie, Hudsucker Proxy, I think. So I think some students over time try to give it some kind of name recognition. But what it's probably most known for outside of Ball State is being pretty average. It's, basically Middletown America. So,
right.
Even many news agencies, when trying to figure out what the average American believes, will visit Muncie and do polling, as Muncie has had some pretty good success in picking the presidential candidates, or the U.S. presidents. And so Ball State's the largest employer up there. The IU Health Ball Hospital is the second largest. Some other notable things, obviously David Letterman is the most famous alumni, but maybe a little lesser known is Bob Ross, the painter. He filmed a show in Muncie. So obviously Jim Davis is also an icon up there. He started the Garfield cartoon. So it's an interesting market. Obviously it's pretty affordable, as it's basically kind of in between Indianapolis and Fort Wayne. And so it looks like a very interesting place to look at for investing.
All right. Well, thanks for that recap. Yeah, there are a little, it's kind of amazing, all the little tidbits about it. So it's what, about basically an hour north, slightly east of our office. Is that right?
An hour and 15. Yep.
Yeah, about an hour and 15, 65,000 people. So great. Well, Jake, yeah, you were a resident as a Ball State student and graduate for a few years. So you have some good insight into the city. So thanks for that. So Devon, you were pretty instrumental, like I mentioned before, and talking to leadership about, Muncie's a market that we should consider. And tell us why you thought, what interested you about Muncie?
Yeah, so I think as a company have been talking about expanding for a while now. I know we expanded our territory a few years ago now, and so I think just as we were looking at potential options, Muncie just kind of made sense. Geographically, we're already in Anderson. We've had a lot of success in Anderson. It's been a great market, and Muncie's really only another 15-20 minutes past Anderson. So I think geographically, it makes a lot of sense. I think, there's a lot of, as Jake mentioned, affordable properties up there. And as most people know, it's getting really hard to buy houses. Indy is super competitive. Prices have gone up tremendously. So I think kind of getting a little bit more outside the city, there's just a little bit less competition, lower home prices, which means, purchase price to rent ratios are better. I think there's a lot of potential for, I know a lot of clients that I'm working with are interested in doing the BRRRR method.
Mhm.
I think there's a lot of opportunity up there for that. There's a lot of properties that need work. So I think for investors looking to do that strategy, I think we will have a lot more opportunity than we're seeing in Indy for that. It's just really hard to buy homes enough below market value in Indy to accomplish that. So I think that those are definitely some of the main factors. And I think it's just good to keep growing and offering different opportunities for our clients. So
Right. Yeah. I mean, you were kind of leading the charge, and we've talked about Muncie before in the past, but you brought it up again several months ago and said, we need to look at this market. The one thing that's interesting is you mentioned it's so close to Anderson, and some people probably know this about us, but we have a lot of staff that live in and around Anderson. We have a lot of vendors up there already, so it wasn't a stretch for us in that way. I think we had to get we had to get different access to a different MLS because it's outside of MIBOR, but that was pretty easy all in all. So yeah, it wasn't like we relocated to a different state and, had to set up shop there. This one just kind of more of a creep into different, outlying areas of central Indiana. So thank you, Devon, for that. So let's talk about pros and cons. Investors out there are wondering, well, okay, you've mentioned a couple of pros, but, Devon, or Jake, what are some other pros? We talked about lower home prices, but you can talk about that and just other, advantages for an investor if they're going to buy in Muncie.
I can go on that. Well, I think the first thing that comes to mind is appreciation. Probably most cases probably not going to see a lot of it. It's got a really good population. It's 65,000. That's pretty solid. And, Ball State, is always going to have some level of enrollment. I think it's around 20,000. So when thinking about demand, that would suggest that there should be good demand on a year-to-year basis, on that. Now, how much will property values really appreciate is anybody's guess, but, with it being affordable, that is kind of one of the good reasons you may have better cash flow than appreciation over time, so that's kind of a plus minus there.
Yeah. Devon, thoughts on that?
yeah, no, I agree. I think, from my perspective, I think, the biggest pro is just going to be cash flow. Definitely, I think cash flow versus appreciation market. But, a lot of clients I work with are looking for that. So I think, and I'll talk about some specific houses I checked out later on. But yeah, there's some really good deals to be found. So.
Right. Okay. So some of the cons, Jake mentioned appreciation, but what are some cons that you guys, that investors need to be wary of, that they may not get the same benefit as that they bought here in Indianapolis?
Yeah, I would just say it's not a huge growth market. It's what I might call stable, but, even the first major employer there, Ball, Jarring, moved headquarters. There used to be Eastern and Northeastern Indiana used to be rich in natural resources. Well, those are basically gone. A lot of companies have moved out, and so when you're thinking about jobs, is the city really growing? And I can't say with any confidence that is the case. Now, I don't know that it's decreasing in population either. I think it's probably pretty stable, but, is this market going to be very different, in 10 years? I would guess probably not, but, some might see that as a negative. Some might not, it really depends on the person. But I think just over the course of 15 years, one of the last times I actually spent considerable time up there, the city didn't look terribly different. The university does. It's nicer, and they've certainly grown, so there's some positivity there. I think enrollment's gone up a little bit, so that's probably what I would say, on my end.
Right. I just looked this up, Jake, while you were talking there. And so right now, as of 2021, Muncie stood at about, like you mentioned, 65,000 people, just over. In 2020, so 21 years ago, it was at just over 70,000. So it has shrunk a little bit. But the bottom line is most cities in Indiana have shrunk a little bit. That's just happening. So overall, I would say it's a fairly stable population. We'll see how it works out in the next 10 years, but those are just some numbers for people to consider. Devon, your thoughts about cons and investing in Muncie?
Yeah, I definitely agree with what Jake said. And just kind of on top of that too, I think with it being primarily a college town, the median income is going to be, it's pretty low. I think it was around, I think when I looked it up, it was around like 32,000 or something like that. So, that could be a challenge, just trying to find qualified tenants. And, I know when you're dealing with students, sometimes you have to, do things a little bit differently, or, get a cosigner, things like that. So, finding qualified tenants for your properties, meeting income requirements and stuff like that could be a little bit more challenging, just given that a large portion of the population is students. I know renting to college students, I think it's a pretty 50-50 split. Some people absolutely love that and seek that out, and some see that as a con. So, if people don't want to rent to college students, or, it might not be the best market for them. So,
yeah, we don't do like student housing per se, right? So we're located just a few minutes from Butler, IUPUI, which I think they've changed their name now. They're obviously really close, and University of Indianapolis is here. I mean, we do rent to college students, I'm certain, but we're not one of those companies that, throw a yard in the sign 365 days a year and sign up for spring of 2020 or fall of 2024 and fall of 2025. But if college students come around, we do rent to them. I don't know that we have any data that suggests that they took better or worse care of the property. I certainly haven't heard of any horror stories regarding college students. It really comes down to the students, right? I mean, there's going to be people who take really, really good care of their properties, and there may be some students that don't. So, the key is obviously to get the screening down and make sure who's living in your property, and if there's students, to make sure there's some co-signers to ensure that rent gets paid. So,
definitely.
All right, yeah, thanks for that. So, Jake, there's an adjacent city, and you've talked about this a little bit. It's not big, but I think it's worth mentioning. Yorktown. You've talked about that town quite a bit, and I wanted to just get your thoughts and give our listeners an idea of what they can expect, maybe if they venture over just adjacent to Muncie, which is Yorktown. So give me your thoughts on that.
Yeah, Yorktown's a nice little city. As a matter of fact, it's kind of the premier school district over there. And so I actually have some friends that are from Muncie that worked for Ball State, and they lived in Muncie for a little while, and they moved to Yorktown, once they had kids. Mm-hmm. And that was primarily due to the school district. But Yorktown is an area that's in growth mode, so if you were to drive through there 20 years ago, you're going to kind of see an old-fashioned downtown, older buildings, mom and pop restaurant shop, really nothing new. But that's certainly not the case now. So if you go to downtown Yorktown now, you'll see, modern multifamilies, being built downtown, kind of revitalized parks, stuff like that. And it's a highly residential area. There's not a lot of businesses over there. It's right off the highway. And so, I guess word on the street, at least from the friends I got up there are, a lot of the people are moving to the Yorktown School District, and just to primarily target that, and it does have a nicer feel to it than a lot of areas of Muncie does.
Yeah.
So that's definitely an area to keep an eye on, because you would expect demand to be strong, if you're in the Yorktown School District, as people would target that, as one of their key factors in renting or buying.
Yeah, that's interesting because I think you will see population spike there. I mean, good schools attract people, attract residential, and so it's not unlike a lot of suburban areas around Indianapolis that have established really good schools, and then population just explodes around them. So I do think Yorktown's an interesting spot to keep our eye on, and maybe help some investors buy some properties there. So okay, well, let's transition a little bit. I want to talk, Devon, this is going to be mostly you, but I want to talk about some, let's give people some actual examples of what is up there and get into some numbers a little bit. So I'll let you go ahead and start. It looks like you got 3 different properties lined up here. Just give us some breakdowns of these things.
Yeah, for sure. So I looked at about 10 to 15 properties over the last couple of weeks, just trying to kind of get a feel, and saw a lot of things that, would definitely be something I would recommend people pull the trigger on. And like I mentioned earlier, we looked at one property that was almost a perfect BRRRR, and that I haven't seen that in several years. That almost doesn't exist. I mean, this property was a really nice, 31.5 brick ranch. It had been sitting on the market for several weeks by the time I looked at it, and it was listed at $100K. So I think you could probably even try to go in lower than that. Very straightforward cosmetic rehab from what I could see, probably around $30K. And I think, the ARV would have been easily 170. So, you're well within that 75% ARV rule that a lot of people look for when doing a BRRRR. And yeah, that's just something I haven't found in Indy in a long time for a decent house in a nice neighborhood. So
yeah, you're right. So what kind of rents would someone expect on that 3-bedroom, 1.5 bath brick ranch?
I think if you do a decent, at least middle of the road updates and finishes, I think you could probably get 12 to 1,300 pretty easily.
Okay, which is a good rent. I mean, that's not a bad rent at all.
Definitely.
Okay, all right. So property B.
Yeah, another one. We didn't get to look inside of this one, but I do know it definitely needed some work based off the listing photos, but it's actually a larger multifamily, 8 units. So it was actually 2 buildings. So there was a 6-unit building and then a 2-unit building, just kind of all in the same plot. But it was only listed at $199,000, and based off some quick calculations that I did, you should be able to pull in at least $5,000 in rent per month. So obviously the numbers on that are fantastic, even if you did have to put in a little bit of work. And I mean, that building in Indy would probably be $400,000 to $500,000 depending on where it's located. So to pull in that kind of rent, that purchase price is absolutely unheard of in Indianapolis.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, that's a lot of rent for the price, no doubt about it. So,
yeah.
Okay, property C.
Yeah, last one was kind of more of a straightforward one, just a pretty typical little 3-bedroom, 1-bath bungalow. Very typical to what we'd see in some of these, downtown older neighborhoods in Indy. $70K purchase price. It was pretty much move-in ready. I'd say probably would need, very, very minor little things to get a tenant in there, if anything, and easily, would rent for $800 to $900. So that was a pretty good one. Yeah.
So you buy it for 70,000, put a little bit into it, maybe not, but you're saying minimal, and then you're looking to rent it for $800 to $900, which again is above that 1% rule, and that 1% rule is almost a myth. It's like that's really hard to achieve. So yeah, 3 good properties. So, okay. Well, Devon, thank you for that. We've spent a little time in Muncie. Jake mentioned he spent 4 years there as a student. Jake, you got back up there last week or a week before. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then we took a trip up. I know Devon and Chris Herring, our project manager, went up a couple of weeks ago to look at some properties, and then we all loaded up with, so it was myself, my business partner, Scott, and then Don Castelluccio, our primary, he manages our property managers. And so Devon, you took us on a little tour of some properties up there. I'd been to Muncie. It's just been for a long time, but it just feels like Jake said, it's just kind of a normal town, right? I mean, there is a nice university, Ball State has some nice athletic facilities out there. No question. They really built that up. And so, but other, when you kind of sprawl out and you go to different little neighborhoods and things, it kind of just feels like you're in just kind of a normal town. So yeah, I felt very comfortable up there. I liked the properties we saw. I was kind of shocked at the prices that there were up there. So yeah, all in all, I think there's a lot of value to be had up there. Any closing thoughts from you guys, just to put a button on this? Any closing comments you want to make about Muncie and just what it has to offer?
Yeah, I did kind of want to circle back. I think one big opportunity we have, one thing I noticed is a lot of properties that are, kind of currently up for rent or things that we looked at, a lot of the quality is lacking, I would say, for what is offered for people looking for rentals. And I think T&H has really, really high and, good standards for our properties. So I think as we move up there and, I think the level that we are going to get properties to, I think, we're going to offer a really good product to potential renters up there and better quality than what is available now and has been. So I think that will also really help with demand for our properties specifically for, when people are comparing their options. So.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, I'm glad you brought that up because I do think we can help raise the game, right? And I think it could be lacking. When Scott and I first started investing, we bought almost everything in the Broad Ripple area. Now we were, I guess, liberal with what we called Broad Ripple, SoBro, whatever you want to call it. But we found that most landlords, as long as it had a roof and some windows that closed, called it okay. And we have just really seen I'll call it a gradual change over the last 20 plus years that we've been investing, where you have to put a good product out there because there are more rentals in the market than there ever have been. And there's frankly, people are expecting a higher level of property, a higher level of service, better technology. So residents just have a higher expectation when they go into not only apartments, but single families, which we focus on. So I'm glad you brought that up, Devon. I think it's an important point. Jake, you were going to say something?
Yeah. Actually, it sounds like a plug, but it's not. I just think, the property management companies, by and large, do not have good reputations, up there. And I'm not so sure there's a lot of them, and I remember when I lived up there, our property management company really wasn't very helpful at all. They wanted to collect rent, but the maintenance side was pretty difficult, to get, somebody out, and that was just as an average Joe student, and wasn't in property management, didn't know this side or see it. And so I think the feel is, if there's a quality option in that area, we could really grow there, and it is important for the tenants to have, very positive interactions with their property managers, and we've actually had anecdotally, a couple renters that have come to us from the past that have wanted to rent their property out, with us. This is Indianapolis, but that's, I think, the biggest compliment you can kind of get, as a PM in some ways, when you have a former resident become a client, in the future. And, so I think it'll be a really cool experience, to kind of get started up there. And I know we have some clients that already have some properties, and it'd be nice to grow this thing, and so I think it's a really good opportunity.
Yeah. Just thinking to myself here, I don't know what Ball State's requirements are. So like a lot of universities, you have to live on campus the first year. Right. So that's why they kind of get you on campus, make sure you're close, make sure they get their dorms filled. But then I'm assuming you can move off campus, and I could be wrong about Paul Stem going off my experience at Indiana University. But so let's say you have a group of people, like say a couple of roommates move in their sophomore years. Well, you could have them for 3 years theoretically, as long as you take care of them, right? As long as they're provided a good service. So I think that's an interesting prospect as well. It's hard to move, and college students are probably more notorious for moving than your average person. But at the same time, if you could get them comfortable and happy with where they live, then maybe you have a tenant for multiple years. So, all right, well, that's a wrap on Muncie. I guess to put just a final word on it, it's a lot of value up there, right? I mean, there's definitely some deals to be had. Downside is you probably are not going to see that appreciation. The population has decreased a little bit, but it may not. We're not going to probably see a boom in population in Muncie, Indiana anytime soon. So your appreciation may not be there. But overall, if you're looking for a cash flow market, which is hard to find these days, then this may be the place to do it. So, well, Devon, Jake, thanks for joining me. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Having us.
Yeah. Well, I hope everyone's picked up some information that'll help them in their investing. We'll be back next month with another podcast. In the meantime, we encourage you to share this podcast with your investing friends. Leave us a review and don't hesitate to reach out to us with any questions. Until next time, thank you so much for listening, and please stay invested in your investment.